Hey, it's Elia. We here at Talkhouse recognize that in 2020, even more than usual, life has sometimes felt like a bit too damn much. So we partnered with the very rad nonprofit Sound Mind to bring our listeners a free mental health toolkit. Over at talkhouse.com/soundmind, you'll find valuable resources that cover everything from coping with coronavirus anxiety and grief, to depression and bipolar support, to suicide prevention help. There's links to support groups and to sliding scale therapy. You can check out community-specific resources for BIPOC, Latinx, and LGBT-identifying folks, as well as frontline workers, parents, and musicians. These are tough, tough times, and we're all feeling it. We want to make sure our listeners and readers are able to get the help they may need, starting at talkhouse.com/soundmind.
Hi, this is Carrie Brownstein.
This is DJ Premier.
This is Darren Aronofsky.
You got the RZA right here.
Rose McGowan.
Radiohead.
Aisha Tyler.
Tribe Called Quest. Fred Armisen.
Prince Paul.
Javier Munoz. Seth Meyers.
Frankie Cosmos.
Flying Lotus.
Hi, we're Chaim, and you're listening to the Talkhouse Podcast.
What's up? What is up? It's your host, Elia Einhorn. Welcome back to the Talkhouse Podcast. We have a sick show for you today. Country singer Charley Crockett in conversation with Diplo. Joining me from Ann Arbor, Michigan, a woman whose work behind the scenes has helped inform the podcast all summer long, but finally on the mic, Samantha Small. Welcome to the show.
Woo, thanks for having me.
Sam, you and I were on the Zoom when we first introduced Diplo and Charley Crockett, and what energy they had, huh?
It was so charming. They just seemed so excited to talk to each other, kind of like fangirling for each other.
Totally. And I'm so excited to report that, as with Courtney Barnett and the Breeders, as with Tune Yards and Laurie Anderson, we here at the Talkhouse have introduced two awesome artists who are now collaborating.
Yep. Charley Crockett posted on his Insta story, snapped a little pic with Diplo. So something's cooking.
I'm ready for it.
Yeah, smells good.
I'm here for it. Now, listeners, in case you're unfamiliar with Charley Crockett, I have to tell you, the man is a direct descendant of Davy Crockett. Yep, that Davy Crockett. And Charley is releasing some of the best country music out today. When I listen to his songs, I am instantly transported to that classic 50s country sound. But instead of the lily white cowboy, Charley brings a different look. He's got Creole blood, he's got Jewish blood, and he totally smashes the mold of what classic country can look like.
His new album is called Welcome to Hard Times, and he himself has had a bit of a struggle.
He has seen the hard times, Sam.
He has seen them, but he's still prospering. He was raised by a single mother in a trailer in the Rio Grande Valley. He's a twice convicted felon. He's lost his sister to addiction, was homeless, but he doesn't let that stop him, and was surviving as a busker across basically everywhere, New York, New Orleans.
And he told us a wonderful story as we were waiting for Diplo to join about busking across Morocco.
Yes, Charley Crockett has a lot of stories, and that's part of his charm, you know? He's putting all of this experience into his music.
Yeah, now, Welcome to the Hard Times is Charley's 7th record, and by far the biggest. He really is getting some juice on this. One thing he did differently is he brought in the Black Keys' Dan Auerbach to do some co-writes. And while you don't hear the Black Keys sound, you feel that level of craftsmanship.
Yeah, definitely. I can say he got a little bit groovier on this album. You can see he has a little bit of funk going on. And not to say that that's missing on the rest of the records, but there's something definitely more intentional about the sound with this record.
From Welcome to Hard Times, let's check out the track Run Horse Run.
I watched the dealer pass the cards around, see trouble coming because I know that sound. Lovers, they will quit you, but people rob you blind. Good friends are awful hard.
I love it, Sam. I love it.
It's quite good, I would say. So yeah, as you can hear from Run Horse Run, there's this sweet 50s sound coming from Charley Crockett, and that's really what drew Diplo to him. Coming from Tupelo, Mississippi, Thomas Wesley Pence, aka Diplo, or as his friends call him Wes, has this rare ability to call anyone in the world to collab. He switches styles with every single album he makes, and no matter what he makes, they're usually a massive success. From the early aughts, he was co-producing MIA's groundbreaking early LPs, Paper Planes.
Yeah, that earned him one of his multiple Grammys.
He also had one with Beyonce for his work with Lemonade. He had one for his supergroup with Skrillex. And I think that's where he collabed with Justin Bieber, the, infamous Where Are You Now?
Yeah, he's really worked with everyone. Snoop Dogg, D'Antwoord, Bad Bunny, and has been in multiple supergroups. We've got one with Mark Ronson. We've got one with Labyrinth and Sia. And as you mentioned, one with Skrillex.
He also founded the dope label Mad Decent, which also has touring festivals, probably at a city near you, one day.
Yeah, one day again soon. Those block parties were awesome. His latest record, Diplo Presents Thomas Wesley Chapter 1, Snake Oil, was a turn towards country pop.
Yeah, it was a strange but really magnificent concoction with tracks like Dance With Me that feature...
He got Young Thug.
Yeah, you got Young Thug with Thomas Rhett. I don't even know how that happened, but it's amazing and weird. We also got the Jonas Brothers there. The list could go on. Just look at the features. It's wild.
And of course, Sam, that record closes out with Diplo's very, very famous remix of Lil Nas X with Billy Ray Cyrus's Old Town Road.
And you can check out Heartless from that very album right now.
Why you gotta be so heartless? I know you think it's all this. You're tearing me apart, and girl, the hardest part is you're so high on attention. Taking my...
That's sweet country music right there.
Sam, that track really shows Diplo working at the forefront of the nexus of hip-hop and country.
At times, their talk may be a bit esoteric, or as Diplo puts it, nerdy. But you can tell that these two have like a real genuine respect for each other's work. The two really talk about how both of these genres have influenced how they really see music, growing up, listening to rap, and then kind of the transition to country, which they both seem to follow.
Yeah, and it was cool to hear them talk about the changing look and sound of country. And within that, the difference between the sort of indie country, as Charley calls it, the blue-collar country, and the major label sounds, which he calls the ivory tower. I love that.
Yeah, my friends and I actually call it the yeehaw-naissance, the introduction to country and to pop music again. It's the yeehaw-naissance.
Yes,
get with it.
I love it. We would be remiss not to mention that the guys also chop it up on fashion.
They're kind of fly, so they're kind of obligated to tell us where they get their clothes.
These are some very sharp-dressed dudes. And interestingly, we hear a take on why it's important to dress like that.
You gotta show you mean business.
Let's hear this conversation. We've got Charley joining from King Electric Recording in Austin and Diplo at home in LA, self-recording on that computer in his pocket.
Little voice memo action.
Let's do it.
Hello, I'm Charley Crockett. That's Charley with an EY, Crockett with 2 T's, and you're listening to Talkhouse Podcast, baby.
Hey, this is Diplo. You're listening to Talkhouse Podcast. My name is not as cool as Charley Crockett's, but that's all you get.
What's up, Diplo?
Hey, man. How you doing?
I'm good, brother. Just staying out the heat.
When I hear your recordings, you have such a great vintage sound. Like, I don't know if that's on purpose or if you are just recording in your barn or like you have a certain Charley Crockett like filter on your microphone, but it sounds so pure and like kind of lo-fi, and it reminds me of like a Daptones kind of sound or like something like vintage.
Yeah, well, because I've recorded most all my albums really in only 2 places in both studios. One is outside of Austin, Texas with this guy, Billy Horton, and then the one that I just did is with this dude, Mark Neal, out of Valdosta, Georgia, and you might know him for the breakout Black Keys record, yeah. Brothers, they did like 10 years back.
So yeah, I was gonna say Black Keys sound is similar. I was working with the Black Keys producer on actually that record with Leon Bridges that I think that you might have heard. That didn't release yet, but I had him kind of do a vintage sound. That's the one thing I'm not good at. Like, I'm a good producer. I came from like the hip hop world, and I came from like exploring all different routes. But the one thing I don't have is like a really awesome studio with instruments. I have like a couple keyboards, my piano, but I don't. You need that live, tough sounding, one room mic, and a producer that records bands is acclimated to just making the band sound so good from a certain era. And that's what I hear on your records, which is awesome.
No, I appreciate that, man. Those studios, I think the most shocking thing about those type of studios, I mean, I grew up in the hip-hop era myself. You know, hip-hop is how I got into music, freestyling and stuff in school, organized sports, and then getting into street playing. I was always in like a crossover of like hip-hop, jazz bands, folk stuff, just kind of all the mix of things you get on the streets in like New Orleans or New York City. And so I come out of that modern world where everything's mashed up myself, and then I got more and more into the old school sound. But one of the most surprising things about walking into like these places that I've been recording is like the lack of gear in there. You know, it's like, it's more of these old rooms. And these guys are building these type of studios after this model down in Crowley, Louisiana, where the old label that was actually based out of Nashville was called Excello Records. And that's where like Slim, Harpo, Lazy Lester, and all these guys came out of South Louisiana, and that sound with all that reverb and those kind of small rooms is just, I've just stuck to that the whole time.
Are you still tracking like bands, or are you guys doing it like separate tracks? This is a pretty nerdy conversation, but like, are you tracking it like, do your band play together, or do you guys play in separate rooms, or do you overdub like every instrument that you have, like the steel guitar and then the rhythm guitar? How do you do it?
So the foundation would be built around the rhythm guitar, drums, upright bass. That's all tracked live in the main room, and then overdubbed the steel and the vocal.
Yeah.
Actually, the last record was done that way, the one with Mark Neal. All the ones before that, everybody's been in the same room.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's how I've done it the whole time. You know, it's cheap.
Yeah, but the sound works. Is your steel guitar player? You're not playing steel guitar, are you? Do you have your own player?
I wish. No. It's this guy named Nathan Fleming. He lives down here in Austin. He's probably the best steel player in the world under 50 years old.
Because like if I hear your records, I feel like the steel guitar is at the same level as your vocals. Like it's always like it's you and steel guitar like going hand to hand, almost like battling. This is like the steel guitar player could be like the main artist too, because you just present steel guitar so much on the records. And I wasn't that familiar with new records with steel guitar until I heard you. Like you're really putting on there and like doing it in different ways, and I think it's awesome.
I appreciate that, Diplo. You know what you just described? That's the way they did it in Nashville and like the Bakersfield sound back in the 50s and 60s. Just exactly what you described was that the vocal and the steel was right there, playing with each other, interwoven, like all that old George Jones stuff. Man, that's how they did it.
Yeah.
And I put that way up front, you know, and it's like country music is a dirty word in radio these days. It's hard for, even if you're a country artist, you know, they be pulling you off to the side, be like, don't call this country, or like, we're going to push your most soul-sounding material to AAA radio. But like, I've been trying to thread that needle between what I do, which is like a mix of traditional country, soul, and rhythm and blues.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to thread that needle, and it's very hard. It's hard to walk that line, you know, to bring up like Johnny Cash, where you can like bring tradition with you and also the modern stuff and deal with this weird world where it's like country music's taboo, and then outside of country music, I hear every day, man, where it's like people are like, man, I love your music, but like I'm somebody that considers myself someone that listens to everything but country, you know? So it's like, I'm kind of curious from your perspective, like how you view it, because I've read some stuff about, you know, I know you interested in country music and coming from Mississippi, like we share that in common. I know I was reading that about you. Like I grew up listening to like Chopped and Screwed, Dirty South hip hop, and a lot of country music, and that stuff was all over the place, sitting on top of each other.
Your music, I feel like, is definitely country, but it's very much an era of country, you know, like, you know, 50s country. And I also hear like this fusion that I feel is familiar to me. Like when I hear like I Am Not Afraid, it feels like it could be from a different era, but I'm like, actually, this is like a reggae song.
Yeah.
You know, you got the bubble organ. So I don't know if that was on purpose or if that was something you just happened to tap into. Or are you trying to push the boundaries a little bit? Like, it's presented as country records, but I know underneath it, you got like some secret stuff you're doing in the records. Like I hear as an artist, I hear you trying to push the envelope a little bit. It's simple. I feel like it's simple to say it's soul music and country together, because I think you and Leon do it at some points. Sturgill Simpson or like Chris Stapleton, they use soul as like, you know, kind of like the timing of the voice and stuff. And that seems really authentic to me. It just seems like, it doesn't seem like a real crazy combination. It just feels like the natural way for country and soul to mix together. But I do feel like you're sneaking some things in your records every once in a while where you're like trying to cross a little couple borders sometimes. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, where me and Leon are similar is like, Leon played on the street too. I played on the street for 10 years. And so when I'm blending all these sounds together, that's literally me bringing everything from the street. Like I got into old time country music playing on the streets in New Orleans because these kids and all these jug bands, I mean, I played on Royal Street, man, like 10 hours a day. I used to play in subway cars in New York City. So it'd be like one part of the day I'd be like right next to some jug band with all these crazy street kids hopping trains and stuff.
Yeah.
And they would be playing nothing but like real old time Hank Williams and like folk songs from the Carter family and stuff. And then maybe in that same day, I'd be playing with a straight brass band, or like be up in New Orleans. I'd hitchhike up there, and 2 weeks later, I'd be in the train cars and be doing like my little thing that you hear me doing with like a kid rapping, freestyling over everything, So it'd be like in a train car in New York City, not everybody liked like what I sang or my thing was, but like if they didn't like what I was doing, they loved the fact that like this dude Jadon was rapping about, the next stop, rapping about the, sports team that the dudes got on his snapback, like relating all this type of stuff. So I kind of merged all these styles together kind of like out of like necessity to survive and to make it. And I think that country music back in the 50s and 60s was incorporating a lot of that stuff. Like if you look at a Willie Nelson record, man, like from the short-haired Willie, they called him from the 60s. Everybody talks about Willie Nelson from the outlaw period, but that period is really when he's going more commercial, which is where he made his money, but nobody would care what Willie was doing in the 70s if it wasn't for those 15, 20 years he put in before that where he was writing all them hits. And those songs, those producers are mixing in lots of reggae and like polyrhythms, the cha-cha. They're doing all that stuff behind the music. Like all those guys in the 60s, that they're calling it country, but that was like, they were mixing up a lot of stuff in a way that like people nowadays in the independent country world, they talk about it, but I don't know that a lot of those folks realize just how eclectic the sounds coming out of Nashville and Texas and Southern California back in those days really was.
Or even if you think about the journey that steel guitar has made, do everybody think it's like a traditional country instrument, but like the journey it made from like Hawaii to California, it's such a, that's one of the weirdest things ever, that's like a hallmark of country music is a steel guitar. It's driven itself to be that, and you can't really separate it, but if you go to the history, you're like, wow, this instrument was pretty weird. Came from some weird places. And country music is that fusion. When you talk about Bakersfield, I feel like country and folk and like, all the way from like going from the outlaw country to like even Fleetwood Mac, how diverse it is. On the surface, it might seem like just kind of like this one sound, but there's so many levels to that kind of California country that seeps from like Woodstock all the way to like Coachella and like all the way to like Stagecoach. And when I get people into country music, I kind of like go that way. I go into that California country because it's really accessible for them. And then they deep dive into a hole where you can go so far. And that's how I found you. You just came up on like on an algorithm for me like about a year or two ago. And I was like, where did this guy come from? And I fell in love with the records and I looked a little bit about your history and I'm like, okay, I saw you were from, Texas and I read about you performing in New Orleans and I hear you talking about that fusion. Because when I used to go to New Orleans, that was like the big city for me too. Like I was born in Tupelo, Memphis was closer, but New Orleans was like the Babylon, right? And then I started to like hang out with like the young kids and all the kids doing DIY stuff. And I realized how punk that city really is. Like all the kids doing music, like some of the jug bands and how that city has always been this perfect American place where everything comes together and it's a big mess, but it's been refined for like 100 years of just excellence in music and culture. I'm glad to see that that's where you came from because that gives you that extra couple stripes on your shoulder because that's a tough place to make it and also a place where you're getting influences from so much.
Yeah, man, that's a perceptive viewpoint of New Orleans. I like that DIY that punk thing you're describing, that is what it is. I think that's exactly what it is. And I played in the street, man. Like, people don't know this about New Orleans. A lot of folks looking at it from the outside in. But, well, number one, I couldn't play in the clubs. I just didn't have my shit together in a way that I could front these bands and, in these clubs on Bourbon Street or Decatur or Frenchman or whatever. But the money to be made playing music in New Orleans, if you don't have an agent and you're like on that national touring circuit, man, there's no money to be made in them bars. All the money to be made is out on the street. We would make a lot of money doing it that way. And because we didn't play in the clubs and you stood out in the street all day, is, besides that river of whiskey flowing through there, is culture that's really flowing through there. It's just so much culture, because, and they ask me this type of stuff all the time. It's like, well, did you grow up listening to country music? And I'm like, well, I mean, I listened to commercial pop country radio right alongside commercial hip hop because that's just what it was, right? In the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
I didn't get into country music in the way that I do it now until I heard it on the street in New Orleans. And one of the reasons that I heard it on the street in New Orleans because they're playing so many drinking songs. And those drinking songs really got those tourists to put their money down.
Yeah.
And in the process, I fell in love with the songwriting and the storytelling. Can't beat it, man.
It seems like your voice was destined to be a country voice. Like I'm listening to you talk now, you just have that low-ass fucking country swagger that it feels like your journey was always going to be there. But I think no one grows up like being presented with old-time country music. You have to find it. Me, I was the same way as you. After school, I put on BET, Rap City, and it was right next to CMT Country Countdown. They were like channel 51 and 52, and I would just bound between the two of them during commercial breaks. And I was equally hip-hop, equally country pop. I didn't really understand Johnny Cash stuff until I went to college. And I was like, learning a little bit, but I was into country pop music as a young person. And I see that natural journey, like how you can take it and end up at country music after 20 years, because you just kind of get there on the songwriting level. And when you talk about the DIY thing, I understand how you make more money on the street because just like me, like if you're going to play a club in New Orleans, the promoter's going to take all the money and cut a little bit up for the artists and the people playing. But like I used to rent VFWs and stuff to put on my DJ sets because if I was playing a nightclub, I would be getting basically like a hourly wage. But if I ran the club myself,
you're getting everything.
If it was small, you get everything. So that's kind of like the same. Like you had the same journey that way when we were learning how to make money and survive doing this.
You was renting out VFWs? That's a good idea.
Yeah, we had. That's all we do. Like I moved to Philly, and that's when we would rent them out because no one was using them, and they were halls. They were big. We'd go fly. We'd get drunk, go to like the streets and just flyer people, and then eventually build a buzz that had a party like monthly, and then take that party and move it to different cities, and then make a little tiny empire and not pay any taxes on the fees because it's all cash.
Yeah.
So same as like a street performer in the same way. So talking about Texas music, I don't know if you know Vinyl Ranch.
Oh yeah, David Wrangler, that's my boy.
He's like a perfect example of like Screwed and Chopped meets country history, and he's just like a perfect Texas guy. And I think that you have that same kind of dichotomy. Like, tell me how you took a journey from hip hop in Texas and make it where you are now.
He's thrown a lot of shows with me together, David Wrangler, and what he's doing with Vinyl Ranch, I think, is a really accurate representation of Southern culture. Like that whole Dolly Parton meme he does with the Jolene, but it's like she's drinking a cup of lean.
Yeah.
It speaks, I think, to our generation of young people in the South. I think it says something about like the mixing of cultures in the South. I think it says a lot about how whiteness in the South has changed its viewpoint with the younger generations and the more mixed generation, which I think we all identify with. It's like the first music hustle that I ever saw was DSR, like Dirty South Riders, and Swisher House pushing all those mixtape CDs out of the trunks of cars and parking lots outside of schools and stuff. And it was all pop music off the radio that they were slowing down and freestyling over. And we would take those CDs and rap over them ourselves, like in basketball or at some dude's house after school or whatever. And freestyling was my first sense of music. My mama got me a guitar when I was 17, and I started playing then. But before that, in middle school, I started rapping, and we was rapping over all those freestyle beats. So I got my sense of meter, melody, timing, performance, everything from hip-hop, really. And that was the only music that I could find that to identify, struggle and a message, which usually is a black message, more often than not, of overcoming struggle and oppression. And that's something that always spoke to me, and it was through sampling of old school music and hip hop. Like I remember it was Wu-Tang Clan how I got into Wendy Renee, them sampling After Laughter, which eventually I recorded on a record. And the night, and that kept happening, was like finding Nina Simone through Kanye.
Yeah, I think After Laughter is like a gateway drug for any young person.
Yeah.
into old music. You just like listen. It's Wu-Tang really. Wu-Tang and DJ Premier, and like those are just like the gateway drugs for me as like a hip hop kid. I just got obsessed with old music. I'm like, if these guys knew about this music and they're putting it and they're twisting it up to make something brand new, that's like anybody could do that. Anybody could buy a sampler. I don't have to start a band. All I gotta do is learn about music. That could be your skill set, and I think that's kind of like what I did as a producer. But After Laughter is like the gateway drug to like all the darkness that you get with soul music and Motown, and then you get the country. And
yeah, that cracked me wide open, man. I got into Wendy Renee, and I started looking at her whole catalog, and I just thought she was the singingest ass woman I'd ever heard at that time. And then I got into Stax, you know, and it's just, well, you just keep going, man.
Yeah, RZA was like the Stax. He was putting up all these crazy, he was just like the Stax guy. He had all the weirdest Stax samples. Because I remember I interviewed later, I was like, his dad just had a CD of like Stax, like a CD compilation of just like all these Stax.
Oh, like the whole discography, box set.
Yeah, like and that's what he would just do. I thought he was like a vinyl digger, but he just like had this one Stax compilation CD that had like 500 songs.
Man, if you're going to have one compilation.
The Stax one.
That's a pretty good one to have, man.
The Stax one, then you got the James Brown discography, and then you got the Motown. And there's like, I got into this producer named Charles Stepney. He was producer for all these records on Chess and Cadet.
Oh, yeah.
And I really love this group called Rotary Connection. And he had this thing where he did psychedelic music and soul, like the beginning of Minnie Riperton. And that was like, he was like my big influence as like a 60s, 70s. He had like Ramsey Lewis covering Beatles and like this weird mix of soul and psychedelia. That kind of like was my thing I learned. But I learned through hip hop to find those guys. And I was like, I want to be a producer now.
Yeah.
So I'm glad we had the same journey.
Oh, yeah, man. It's hip-hop all the way, you know, and I think this stuff about country music and rap and hip-hop today, I mean, they're the same struggles, you know? It's like within country music, there's a lot of country music that's not honest and authentic. And then when it is, you know, and it's the same thing in hip-hop. There's a whole lot of it that is just watered down. And then when you get that real voice coming through, it's obvious, you know? And it doesn't really matter that much what people label that. I think it just comes down to the integrity of what you recording.
Yeah, that's essentially soul music too.
Yeah, man.
This show is brought to you by Patreon, who ask creators, are you tired of being paid in clicks and likes? Social media and streaming platforms help people find your work, but getting you paid is another story. With Patreon, you can stop rolling the dice of ad revenue and per-stream payouts and grow your creative career through the direct support of the people who care the most, your fans. Since Patreon is built for creators, not advertisers, you'll skip the middleman and develop a sustainable income source by offering a monthly membership to your fans. In turn, they'll get access to exclusive community, premium content, and the chance to become active participants in the work they love. The creative system is broken. So if you're a podcaster, video maker, musician, writer, illustrator, a creative person of any kind, sign up on patreon.com now. That's patreon.com. And change the way your creativity is valued by building the steady income stream you deserve.
I'm gonna switch topic real quick, so I really want to bring this up. You might be the best dressed guy I've seen on Instagram as of late, and I'm wondering, you must spend a lot of time shopping. Are you like? I mean, I see the amazing hats, all the fits. It's very to a T. Like, I mean, I'm into like Japanese fashion. I'm not sure if you're into that too, but like that Western wear. I'm not sure if you're digging that deep. Or you going like vintage, just in Austin little clothing shops, or can you give me a little insight into your style, into your fashion?
Oh, man. Well, yeah, I just tour on a bus nonstop. I mean, outside of, you know, this pandemic, playing 5 nights a week. And so, you know, you're just always in a different town. We got a lot of time on our hands, brother. You know what I mean? And so I just hit up a lot of places. People think I pay all this money for these suits and stuff. But I mean, in these little towns, like in Missouri, for example, like Columbia, Missouri, there's 3 or 4 spots in that town that I just like to hit up on rotation whenever I'm there. And I just look all the time. And if you're looking all the time because you ain't got nothing to do, you know, that's when you come across those, you know, $40, $50 polyester 70s Western suits, you know, and like,
yeah,
I buy them all the time. And, you know, coming from a street background, the way that I learned how to make money, coming from poverty in South Texas, you dress like you want people to realize that you are to be respected and that, like, you can collect the check at the end of that night. You know what I mean? And so I've always really put it on to a T. And I like all the custom suits. I see the way that you're doing it, too. I really like the custom nudie style suits, the Miller. I love the Miller Western suits out of Denver from the 60s.
Yeah.
I like buying all that stuff. I love stay pressed clothing. I just think that classic look, man, it just looks good. I like the way pants fit. You know, I don't want them hanging.
Yeah.
They used to hang off my ass. Now I like wearing them with that 12-inch rise. You know what I mean?
Up high, the high waisted.
It make you look better, man. I look like I'm in shape even when I'm not.
I've been wearing like the vintage clothing a lot because my body just happens to fit those men that were wearing clothes in the 60s and 70s. I buy the suits. I don't got to tailor anything. If I buy something new, I got to go spend $200 putting the pants on right, getting the creases right, or getting the shirts, tight enough on me. But yeah, those vintage suits, those like old, you just see the guys wearing them at the Opry or whatever. Like I'll buy all those suits, and I'll fix them up. And then there's like a bunch of new people that are making great stuff, like Union Western and my boy in London.
Are you talking about Texas Joe?
Yeah, that guy in London that makes he does like a kind of nudie style suits, and his girlfriend
does. Yeah, that's Texas Joe. That's my boy. He's over there in Soho.
Yeah, he's awesome.
He loves you, man.
He made me a couple of looks. Yeah, that stuff. I'm lucky that no one's buying all of it, so I can find it when I'm like out on tour too. But there's a lot of like new brands, and especially out of Japan that do the Western, the workwear really well. It's very expensive, but they're like tailoring it like they used to do back in the day, back in, like I said, you said Colorado and Texas. So yeah, I really appreciate your style. And I see your videos. You got like this mashup. You got the ponchos mixed with the new boots, and you got like everything's like really well done. So you're ace at the style. So I really like that.
Well, it takes one to know one, big brother, because don't even act like I got more suits than you. I see you in your videos too. I'm like, where does he get this?
I got too many. I'm just kind of pissed because, the summer was going to be big and I got nowhere to wear. I'm like just dressed up in like sweats, free hats now.
Man, same here.
With a baseball cap. I was so bored yesterday. I went on Bass Pro Shops. I bought like every hat they had in every color. There was like $3.99. I just got I'm only wearing trucker hats nowadays in my house. So I got nothing to do, got nowhere to go. So kind of wish I had somewhere to go show off, man. But in the meantime, I guess just Instagram.
Yeah, that's weird. I took advantage of I just grinding so hard. And, up to this point, most of my records, very little money has been put into. Like, I make the records really cheap and then tour really hard on the independent circuit, like really hard in like, B markets mostly. And that's like the strategy that I've worked with my agent out of Nashville. We work like basically the only modern equivalent to what those country boys would have been working, like Hank Williams and George Jones and Charlie Pride and those guys was working back in the day. I work on the modern version of that circuit. And so when you playing 200 shows a year and the live show is my marketing, but because I don't want to call it a blessing, but my record's relevancy because of the pandemic. I wrote Welcome to Hard Times last year, but then it's just doing a lot better than I could have ever expected because I think it's relevant to the times. And I was able to really focus and make the videos I wanted to make this time, man. I ain't never had more than a half an afternoon to do anything.
Yeah.
Because you're just working nonstop.
I mean, I'm trying all kinds of new things. I don't have like videos to make. I did a couple ideas, but I'm like, got really good into the guitar. I never really got a chance to play it. I'm 41. I just started playing guitar properly like the last 2 months.
That's cool that you picking it up, man.
Yeah, things like that, just because I've always wanted to do it. And I have like, I got like nothing to do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm like, but you got the only new billboard in Hollywood, I noticed the other day.
Oh, that's right.
By,
I paid for that myself, big dog.
You're smart because there's still like billboards for like albums from like a year ago out there that are like not even out anymore. There's like billboards for like my Vegas shows that are not happening. And you got the only new billboard. I don't know why no one's doing that. You're the only new billboard in all of California. I noticed it yesterday.
That's cool. That was my own idea, man. I just I had the money from I got a lot of records out, and I just put my foot down and I said I want a billboard in the middle of LA. I want one in the middle of Houston. I want one in Austin. If they go well, I'm gonna buy more because they're also, man, they're like half off right now, bro.
They're so cheap. I have a label called Mad Decent, and we buy like 100, not big ones like yours. We buy like 100 a year and rent it for the whole year. And we just put up stupid shit, like just text.
Whatever you want.
Yeah, we literally just have 100 billboards. We just put up like a picture. One was like a picture of my gold tooth I had last year with like a Zoom code. You go to my Spotify play. It was just jokes on there. Like it's kind of like, it's like a cheat code. No one realizes people still look at billboards, especially in LA when you're driving because there's traffic. So you got to look at something.
Everybody notices them, man. They've come up in the last few days, and I'm just in the stories. I'm getting tagged in them left and right, and it's like I've been wanting to buy my own billboards forever, And then people were telling me not to do it because the economy had slowed down and all this stuff. They also, there's a lot of pressure on me to like hold the record back till next year, and I'm not a big artist, man. And I'm like, look, if I wait and put it out, and when things get back to good, all the big artists on the big labels with all the big money, they just gonna drown Charley Crockett out. So
yeah, you got a point.
Instead of moving it back, I want to move it forward. And then I just kicked and screamed and complained like crazy to get as big a digital marketing advertising budget as I could. And I poured all my time because I'm not touring. I put 10 days into each video. I put a lot of effort into my strategy for like, because I can't control the big industry. I can't control these radio people.
Yeah.
I can't control this pay-to-play publicity game with the gatekeepers. We can't, even in the world that you're in, it's like a lot of those things are outside our control. It's like, what can we control?
Exactly.
The way we advertise ourselves. We can control our advertising and where we show people that. We can control advertising on YouTube and Instagram. And kind of beyond that, it's out there in the world,
I'm glad you're thinking about that because I know a lot of other DJs and producers, they're like, they keep complaining about this and that, like not getting things done. I'm like, look, now's a chance for you to do something different.
Yep.
Like now's a chance for you to work as hard as you did when you're on tour on something else. Like whether it's another marketing plan, whether it's like me, I've been doing all this streaming and DJing. Like I've started DJing Fortnite. I've tried to do some campaigns with people. I'm just trying to do anything that I wouldn't have done before because I got nothing to lose now. And if you're going to be working really hard when things get back to good, you're going to have a leg up on everybody else. That's important to understand, right? This is a cheesy thing to say, but you always see that picture of like a cat trying to climb a couch or something on a little poster in a school, and it says like, tough times don't last, but tough people do. And it doesn't really make sense till now. You realize like this is going to pass.
Yeah.
But whatever work you put in right now is going to last forever, because now's the time to actually have that ingenuity that's going to count and it's going to matter. So good on you for doing that.
Hey, yeah, man. Hell, I can't afford to stop, and I've just always done it the hard way. But I was wondering, like, with this country album that you've been doing and, like, kind of where you're coming from. I've been seeing see your videos and with the new record and seeing stuff with, like, Orville Peck and a lot of the, like, kind of hoedown style, like, beats that you've been putting down. Like, I was just wondering where you see all that going.
I'll give you the short version of why I did the album. I'm always doing different things, like different projects and dabbling in them as a producer. And then the last couple of years, I realized like the records I make that on my own, like this first project I did was called Major Lazer. It's like a dance hall project. Really.
Yeah, I heard all that.
And I was like, the first thing I do on my own, I control them and I make the most money out of that. I tour them, and like me being the rat race in LA, producing different people's records, fighting for like a Miley Cyrus feature or whatever it is, like someone's record that's like kind of boring. In the end, like it's kind of cheap to do that. And I was like, I put my own records out. I make more money on the road, just like you said, like doing that. And I'm just like, I signed a deal with my friend Ron Perry. He works at Columbia Records, and I was like, what am I gonna do here? I want to like experiment with a major label, but what do I do? And I had this kind of like messing around with some country artists back in the day. I was like, had some records with Sam Hunt and some other guys, and Sturgill, who was a friend of mine who was on Same Management. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I'll do country, because then at least I don't understand the marketing of country music, but if I put that my work on there, if a label's putting it out, I count on them, because I'll just make records and try to help them translate that, because Sony and Columbia had a lot of good country records. So I put on them. I started working on records. It was all random. Morgan Wallen was the first guy to really do a record with me. And everybody in Nashville, you know how it is. Like, they're like, what do I want to do this for? It was either really pop, like nothing against some of those pop country guys, but I didn't want to do too much like that. I was trying to do something different. And Morgan was the only one who gave me a record that was like, here, do whatever you want with it. I'll support it. And that record got real big. We did called Heartless. And it was like a mix of trap music and country, but not in a cheesy way. It sounds like we did it like a real record. That's what I wanted it to feel like. And I started seeing artists like you and Orville Peck, of course, and just being all these guys who were like reaching out to me with the same ideas. They're not from country essentially, but they're like doing this amazing country sound and styles. And I was like getting inspired by them. Even Blanco Brown, Leon Bridges, another guy. I just was like, let me just do this and try to make some sense out of it for myself, something new. And it did really well, like my country project and Thomas Rhett even. I mean, I don't know how I got Thomas Rhett and Young Thug on a record together, but like doing something like that just something like make people, my fans are already like kind of like confused, because I was doing dancehall, then house music, and now country. They're kind of like, any fans that stick with me this long are really, they got a lot of stamina, man, because I'm probably the most confusing person out there, but I really appreciate them. So I just think, and I was surprised that the country, it's probably the biggest records I've done on these country ideas since like Major Lazer. That's like weird that it's like, this is the biggest thing I've done. I don't hear a lot of it. Country music's just like a silent majority. They're hearing it, people are listening to it, and they're going to shows in the B markets, and they're not big internet sensations. They're not big on TikTok. They're not big on Instagram, but their music is traded heavily, and people like are down with that for a long time. Like a record in country takes like a year to hit the top. In pop music or hip hop, it's like you guys got like 2 weeks to show and prove, and then you're gone.
Yeah, that's right.
Someone taking your spot right behind you.
Yeah, that's right. That's true. Sturgill's breakout record, I think, took like a year to climb up to the top. The gulf between like pop country up in these ivory towers and then like that blue collar independent country that they doing today, it's the Grand Canyon between them.
Yeah.
You know, and there's like no man's land in between.
It's totally crazy. I'm trying to do something with my records. I'm trying to do something where there isn't any, there's crossover. Like, you know, I sent you that record like yesterday. I'm just kind of like trying to mess with an idea. Like the new country stuff I'm working on has been like R&B and rappers. I'm asking them to sing these country ideas, like the new thing with like St. John, Leon Bridges, and I said Party Next Door, and like just kind of like, just trying to do something different where there aren't any rules. Because, like I said, if I get Young Thug and Thomas Rhett on a record, and that only happened because Thomas Rhett's father-in-law liked Young Thug's verse. Like, he was the one who co-signed. He's like, this guy sounds like his father-in-law was like in an 80s hair metal band or something, and he like liked Young Thug. And that's the reason that record made sense, because you need someone to, it's country guys, they don't.
Takes a metal guy to tie it together.
Yeah. It's weird because these country guys, they care so much about what's happening in Nashville, they're scared of taking chances a lot of times. And I think in the 70s, like you said, there was no 60s and 70s. People were doing whatever they could. They were changing, they were flipping ideas and making records about drugs and outlaw country. And there wasn't like, and they were doing what they wanted. And they were making a big impact and having influences everywhere. Like those Willie Nelson records, like the Highwaymen, they were heard throughout the industry. People were like listening to those records, they influenced for a long time to come. A lot of new country records, they're just pop. They got the little snap in it and the drums, and then there's the next record sounds like the next record. So I'm glad that there's like a good underground happening in that kind of country and western world that you're part of.
You know what Johnny Cash and Chris Christopherson said about that era? They said that when Bob Dylan came down from New York City to Nashville, he went down there to get away from the New York City thing. And that was a really radical thing that he did, to go down there and work with Bob Johnston. And those records that he made, like Blonde on Blonde, John Wesley Hardin, that stuff that Dylan did, Johnny Cash said himself that opened up the door for all those guys to do what they were doing.
Yeah.
And it took somebody from outside of the like Nashville sound in the mid-'60s, which there were great records getting made, but there was also a lot of really bad records getting made, and they was all starting to sound exactly the same. And like a guy like Willie Nelson, who I think was one of the very best country singers of the 60s, his delivery style, his songwriting, it was so good. I don't believe that it's not that America didn't like the way that Willie Nelson sang. I think it's that the people in Nashville marketing him weren't marketing him. You know what I mean? And so when Dylan came through with all of his muscle and did things his way, that was a big deal. And that opened up a lot of doors for those guys to head in that new direction. And I mean, you know, Johnny Cash himself and Christopherson, all them guys really gave Dylan a lot of that credit, you know, and it's like where I'm at with this stuff, I got all these young kids listening to hip hop telling me, man, I don't listen to country music, but I love what you're doing. That means a lot to me that they're saying that, because I do feel like I'm bringing hip hop and blues and traditional country music with me in a way where the Grand Ole Opry respects what I'm doing, but also kids and urban culture respect what I'm doing, you know? And now that's tough to deal with radio, and like you write about these country guys in Nashville, they're afraid to rock the boat, so to speak, but like they're playing Sam Hunt all over country radio, but like Lil Nas X couldn't get any spins, period. I really don't understand the difference there, you know? I actually, to be honest with you, I really like what he did and the way that made young people look at country music, you know, like outside of the country world.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool, because after that came out, every time somebody see me in a big city walking outside the tour bus, I would hear young people on the street singing, yelling Old Town Road to me, you know, just because of the way I'm dressed and stuff. And it's like, is something like that going to hurt me, or is it going to help my cause?
It's only going to help. Bring more people to the table is only beneficial to everybody.
That's what I'm saying.
That's always, it's been like that with music since the beginning of time.
This is the first time that I feel like young culture is looking back at country as a style, as a cultural contribution, without all of the stereotypes and the racial separation and all this stuff. Young people are looking at it like it's hip, without all the baggage.
Yeah.
And that's a very cool thing, man. You know, that's a very cool thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that another thing is like, you know Krongben, who also from Texas?
Oh, yeah, I know him because I know him through Leon, yeah.
Yeah, so every time I put that on, I just like, if I'm at a party anywhere, like there needs to be a mood made, I just put on Krongben.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just like, and it leads into the Leon collabs, and it's just that, those records who are a perfect like Texas, multiracial fusion, but it's like kind of got this country background or country.
Yeah, it's kind of got that West Texas desert kind of openness.
Yeah, and that's something that every young person, like, they're always like, what is this? And that like spreads like wildfire.
Everybody loves it.
Yeah, it's like, it's something that if you give country, it's like in its basic, pure form, as something sweet, something really Americana, something like Western and mysterious at the same time, something with great songwriting and simple. Anybody can gravitate to that. And it's got this, the greatest building blocks to create music is coming from like, really, really pure country music. And like I said, the stereotypes really ruined it. And maybe not because all the artists I know are such awesome people. The old guys, the new guys, they've been through a lot, from Dolly and Willie to like the new guys like you and Sturgill and Orville who are doing new great things. You're never gonna find a country artist that doesn't have a great sense of unity and ideas. But I think a lot of times the places where it gets played and has people and audiences that do give it a bad rep. And I constantly feel like I'm fighting to help break those stereotypes about country music, even in my little world that I'm breaking people to. But I think it's changing. I'm just kind of pissed that Stagecoach was canceled because that was like the weirdest vibe I had last time I had Lil Nas X and Billy Ray play with me. And that's such a weird collab because, Billy Ray, Ron Perry at Columbia put Billy Ray on that song because Billy Ray back in the 90s also was like kind of like clowned out of country a little bit. He was like, but he was like not even really country, but he was. I mean, he brought people to country back in that sense. Like, he was like, country could be awesome and rocking. You could dance to it. And I think Ron was like, I'll put him on.
Man, they did the same thing to Shania Twain.
Yeah.
They tried to say Shania Twain wasn't country. You listen back to her now, man, and that's like
100%.
That's top country.
I mean, I think even just like women in country in general, man. Like it's like the dark zone, like with the way they're treated and like even like on radio. And I think,
yes, sir.
I don't want to get into it too much, but it's been like that since I've seen it. You have to have someone so powerful like Dolly to take it out of country, do something like 9 to 5 and go, I'm gonna do pop music and,
even Loretta Lynn
that's where I can get the
through.
respect as a woman. Yeah, like I can get respect as a woman that way. And I see a lot of artists nowadays, like trying to get a woman on feature on my record, like there's no women around. It's like kind of crazy. Like it's all such a male dominated audience, especially on the radio. And that's for another podcast. But
that's real.
I got to roll out here in a little bit, but I was going to ask you, are you really related to Davy Crockett? It's like one of the last questions I wanted to ask.
Yeah, man, I'm a direct descendant through Elizabeth Patton. Elizabeth Patton Crockett, his wife, they had all the kids with. Yeah, I'm a direct descendant I got a lot of family out of Arkansas, and then Elizabeth is buried in Granbury, Texas, and my grandfather was always real proud of that. And I almost, you be doubting yourself because people clown on you so much and think all these tall tales and all this stuff, but I've got proof on Ancestry.com, baby. How about that?
I love it.
But grew up with that, man, and I've been running with that. And he's an interesting character because there's the real Davy Crockett that nobody really knows anything about, and then there's the commercially viable Davy Crockett, which is I like to call the Disneyfication.
The raccoon hat.
Yeah.
That's
what brought him to the household, and I've always felt like part of what I wanted to do was be like, much like what we're talking about with country music is, I'd like to have an impact on how people maybe see him, not just as this Disney character, but more of a complex, kind of unique American individual, that represents Texas.
And the frontier and just like, American dreams and that kind of vibe. Charley, thanks for making time for me. And I appreciate what you're doing. I hope that we can link up soon. I know we're trading some texts and emails. I hope we can get a record done. That'd be awesome for my project.
That'd be a hit, man. I think we keep talking about this thing. We might be able to do something cool.
Yeah. And also, I think we could do a whole other podcast just talking about your history, because I love the New Orleans vibe. I remember going to so many parties there and just speakeasies still happening there.
Oh, man.
And I remember falling asleep in the bonfire, my shoes melting one night, and having someone had to pick me up, drag me out of the fire. And it was a long night. But we could talk about New Orleans for hours, man, me and you. But let's get back together soon. Thanks for taking time, and I'll speak to you later.
Oh, no, man. Pleasure belongs to me.
Later.
Bye.
Charley Crockett, Diplo, thank you so much for joining us here on the Talkhouse Podcast. We cannot wait to hear what you two get up to in the studio.
Coincidentally, the two guys name-dropped Wu-Tang Clan's RZA, and RZA actually appeared in conversation with Paul Banks a little while back. You can check it out in our archives.
And while you're there, make sure to subscribe to the show because we have some insane episodes coming up, including next week's Perfume Genius with Jeremy O. Harris, the playwright behind Slave Play, the aforementioned Paul Banks of Interpol and Muzz in conversation with Shepard Fairey, Deerhoof with Wadada Leo Smith, Bob Mould with Bully, and Mac DeMarco with Dayglow.
All amazing.
It's a wild couple months ahead.
Yeah, you better stay tuned. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts. They're at Talkhouse. And also, the Talkhouse Podcast Live on Insta series is continuing on September 2nd at 6 p.m. Eastern with Anya Marina and Nikki Glazer.
Yep, Nikki Glazer has memorably been on the show before with the Bachelorette Caitlin Bristow in one of our, I'm going to use an old-timey 50s word in honor of Charley, a saucy episode, a blue episode. She's great.
That's wild.
That'll be a hell of a live.
I'll be there.
For today's show, Charley was recorded by Gary Calhoun James at King Electric Recordings in Austin, and Diplo recorded himself at home in LA on that black mirror we all carry around in our pockets. Our producer extraordinaire is Mark Yoshizumi. The Talkhouse Podcast theme was composed and performed by The Range. Till next week, I'm Elia Einhorn.
And I'm Sam Small.
Peace. And country hip hop.